On the cold morning of October 15, 2018, in Heidenau, a small town in Bavaria, Moritz Wolf woke up before 5 in the morning. At 44, Moritz was an experienced electrician who worked on temporary contracts at power plants in the region. On that Tuesday, his plans were different. His traditional 3-day annual hunting trip to the Black Forest. Sabine Wolf, 40, a City Hall employee for 12 years, watched her husband organize equipment in the shed behind their house. Moritz loaded his silver 2010 Volkswagen Amarok with his licensed rifle, camouflage clothing, a tent, and supplies. It was his annual routine, 3 days of solitude in nature to escape the stress and financial problems that had been piling up. The couple was facing considerable difficulties. The factory where Moritz worked had cut back on temporary staff, leaving him virtually unemployed since August. Their debts totaled 30,000 euros, a mortgage, credit cards, and overdue bills. Even so, Moritz insisted on maintaining his tradition. "I need these 3 days to think clearly," he told Sabine the night before. "When I come back, I always have better ideas about how to solve our problems." Sabine nodded, as she always did, but internally something had changed. In recent months, she had become close to Dennis Schroeder, a 38-year-old computer technician who worked for the city. Dennis was divorced, lived alone, and had a history of minor run-ins with the law. The relationship had started with casual conversations, but had intensified in the weeks leading up to Moritz's hunting trip. At 5:30 a.m., Moritz kissed Sabine on the forehead. "I'll be back Thursday evening as usual. Don't worry if I don't call. The reception is terrible in the forest." Sabine waved from the window as the Amarok disappeared around the bend. That was the last confirmed sighting of Moritz Wolf alive. Thursday, October 18th, passed without any sign of Moritz. Sabine called his cell phone several times, but the calls went straight to voicemail. At first, she wasn't worried. Moritz often extended his hunting trips. Friday came and went in the same way. Sabine called 2 of Moritz's hunting friends, Klaus Lehmann and Fabian Peters, but neither had any news. On Monday, October 22nd, a week after his departure, Sabine contacted the authorities. At the Heidenau police station, she told Sergeant Christoph König the whole story. The annual hunting routine, the area where Moritz camped near Tottenau, the prolonged silence. She provided a description of the Amarok. Silver 2010, license plate BAMW 847. Within 48 hours, a search operation mobilized 3 counties. Red Cross teams, state police, and a forest ranger helicopter participated. Sniffer dogs came from Munich. For 5 days, 60 people combed Tottenau. Trails, campsites, shelters, ravines. Surveillance cameras were checked. Guards interviewed other hunters. No sign of Moritz or his truck was found. What was baffling was the complete lack of evidence. In an area where hunters left traces, campfires, food scraps, footprints, there was no indication that Moritz had been there. His license was not registered at the checkpoints. No camera captured his truck on the access roads. On November 12, 3 weeks after his disappearance, Sabine received a letter that would change everything. It was a plain envelope with no return address posted from Frankfurt. "I can't go on like this. I need to start over somewhere else. Don't look for me." Sabine recognized Moritz's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she reread the words. At first she felt relief. He was alive. But the relief quickly gave way to anger, abandonment, and a strange feeling she couldn't identify. The authorities examined the letter, comparing the handwriting with Moritz's documents. Preliminary analysis confirmed consistency. With no signs of coercion or forgery, the case was reclassified from missing person to voluntary departure on November 20, 2018. State Police Detective Andreas Böhm expressed skepticism. Men don't just vanish into thin air. If he wanted to disappear, why leave his truck? Why not sell his property first? But his objections were overcome by the evidence of the letter and the lack of signs of foul play. Officially, Moritz Wolf had voluntarily abandoned his life to start over in an unknown place. The case was closed. The small town stopped talking about the electrician who simply disappeared. Sabine began referring to her husband as absent, never expressing anger over his supposed desertion. She adopted a resigned attitude, as if she had always known this day would come. Only Lisa Wolf, Moritz's sister, remained disturbed. A nurse in Regensburg, Lisa could not accept that her brother would abandon his life without a word. Moritz and she had been in close contact. She knew his character better than anyone. Lisa tried to reopen the investigation several times but was consistently dismissed. The case was closed with no public interest in questioning the official conclusion. Over time, the story of Moritz Wolf faded from memory in Heidenau. It became just another family mystery, the story of the man who went out hunting and decided never to return. The months following Moritz's disappearance brought surprisingly rapid changes for Sabine Wolf. In December 2018, just 2 months after the letter from Frankfurt, she made a decision that surprised her colleagues at City Hall. She requested a transfer to Rosenheim, a larger city 120 kilometers from Heidenau. Her reasoning was understandable. She needed a fresh start, far away from painful memories and constant questions from neighbors. "I can't walk down the street without someone asking me if I've heard from him," she explained to her supervisor, Stefan Hermann. The transfer was easily approved. Sabine had a solid reputation, and her situation generated natural sympathy. In January 2019, she was officially resettled in Rosenheim, working in the building permit department. At the same time, she began legal proceedings related to Moritz's disappearance. In February, she requested access to the life insurance policy that Moritz had taken out through the IG Metall Union. The $85,000 policy included a specific clause for disappearances. After 180 days of confirmed absence without financial activity, benefits could be released to the spouse, even without an official death certificate. The process was not automatic. Allianz Deutschland conducted its own investigation into the circumstances of the disappearance. Private investigators reviewed the case, interviewed Sabine, consulted police records, and visited the area where Moritz had allegedly been hunting. After 3 months of analysis, in May 2019, they agreed to pay the full benefit. With the $85,000, Sabine paid off all her debts: home financing, credit cards, bank loans. The remainder, approximately $48,000, was deposited into a savings account in her name in Rosenheim. The house in Heidenau was put up for sale in June 2019. Sabine hired a local real estate agent, explaining that she could not live where she had shared so many memories with Moritz. The property was sold for $165,000 to a young family with 2 children. During the process, Sabine showed remarkable efficiency in clearing out the property. She donated Moritz's belongings to charities: clothes, tools, electronics. Hunting items were sold to a sports store in Munich. Neighbors commented on how meticulous and detached she seemed as she erased traces of their shared life. It was as if she was systematically erasing any evidence that Moritz had ever existed, commented Ingrid Bauer, a neighbor for a decade, years later. Not that there was anything wrong with that. Everyone deals with grief in their own way. But there was something almost professional about the organization. A notable exception was the shed in the backyard. Sabine kept the key and visited several times during the final weeks. The new owners found the shed empty, but with signs of intensive cleaning. The concrete floor was discolored in spots, as if heavy chemicals had been used. Parallel to these changes, the relationship between Sabine and Dennis had evolved significantly. What had started as casual conversations had turned into intimacy during the traumatic months after the disappearance. Dennis had been extraordinarily helpful. He helped with bureaucratic tasks, offered emotional support during interviews with the police and insurance company, and became her main social companion. When Sabine decided to move, Dennis announced his intention to also leave Heidenau. In August 2019, Dennis got a job as a support technician at a software company in Rosenheim. He rented an apartment 10 minutes from Sabine's work. Although they kept separate residences, they spent almost all their free time together. To new colleagues, Dennis was introduced as a close friend helping out during a difficult time. The romantic nature of the relationship was not explicitly acknowledged, but it was evident. They had lunch together, he picked her up from work, and they were seen at local supermarkets and restaurants. The discretion was intentional. Sabine knew that a relationship that became public too quickly could lead to unwanted speculation. Technically, she was still married. She had not filed for divorce or requested a legal declaration of Moritz's death. Sabine adopted a careful strategy of rebuilding her identity. In unofficial context, she began using her maiden name, Sabine Richter, although legal documents still reflected her status as Wolf. She changed her profile picture on social media, removing images with Moritz, and stopped wearing her wedding ring. With new acquaintances, she rarely mentioned Moritz spontaneously. When asked about her marital status, she would respond vaguely that she was reorganizing her personal situation, or simply that she was single. Those who knew about her disappearance were given a simplified version. Her husband had left a letter explaining his need for a new life. The strategy proved effective. Sabine quickly established a new social identity as a single, professionally competent woman rebuilding her life after a difficult period. No one questioned the details of her past. Dennis played a crucial role in this reinvention. He was charming, attentive, and skilled at steering conversations away from sensitive topics about Sabine's past. To outside observers, they appeared to be a normal couple building a solid relationship. By the end of 2019, Dennis had informally moved into Sabine's apartment. Although he kept his own lease for practical reasons, he spent every night at her residence. They established a comfortable domestic routine. They shared expenses, went shopping together, and planned weekends and short trips. During this period, Moritz's Amarok disappeared completely from official records. The insurance in Moritz's name was cancelled for non-payment in March 2019. The license plates expired without renewal. For all practical purposes, the truck had vanished like its original owner. Sabine explained to acquaintances that she had arranged for the vehicle to be sold through an intermediary after moving. She never provided details about the buyer or price, and no one pressed her for information. It was understandable that she wanted to get rid of a painful reminder. The only person who tried to maintain regular contact was Lisa Wolf. Lisa called monthly, seeking updates on possible contact from Moritz or new information. Sabine responded politely, but offered little information. "If I knew anything, you'd be the first to know," she repeated consistently. Lisa noticed subtle changes in Sabine's attitude. At first, she seemed genuinely concerned about what had happened to Moritz, she would recall years later. But gradually she began to sound more resigned, as if she had accepted that he would never come back. There was something about the way she talked about starting over that bothered me. In December 2019, 14 months after the disappearance, Sabine and Dennis took their first trip abroad together, a week in Rome during the Christmas holidays. Discreetly posted photos showed the happy couple exploring monuments, dining in romantic restaurants, enjoying intimate moments. To the casual observer, Sabine Richter seemed like a woman who had overcome a traumatic period and found new happiness. The narrative was clean, inspiring, a story of resilience after devastating loss. Beneath the surface of this carefully constructed life, uncomfortable details remained unexplained. The speed of adaptation, the efficiency with which she had liquidated traces of her previous life, the coincidence that her relationship with Dennis had developed at just the right moment to offer support. And most disturbingly, the complete absence of any sign of Moritz Wolf for over a year. No banking activity, no attempt to contact family, no official records. For a man who had supposedly decided on a new life, he had become remarkably successful at erasing his previous existence. While Sabine and Dennis were establishing a new life in Rosenheim, the silver Amarok was silently cruising the German roads with fake license plates, driven by someone who knew very well where they had found the vehicle and why its owner would never come back to claim it. The years between 2020 and 2023 passed with deceptive tranquility for Sabine Richter and Dennis Schroeder. Their life in Rosenheim had settled into the comfortable rhythm of an established couple. Shared morning routines, weekends exploring Bavaria, annual vacations to modest European destinations, and the gradual building of a social network that saw them as an inseparable unit. When the COVID-19 pandemic shut down much of Europe in March 2020, the couple faced lockdown with practical efficiency. Dennis, whose tech job adapted to working from home, turned the spare bedroom into a functional office. Sabine, whose responsibilities at City Hall were deemed essential, continued to work in person with reduced hours. Social isolation had a beneficial side effect. It reduced opportunities for acquaintances to ask questions about Sabine's past or question the chronology of her relationship with Dennis. Social interactions were mostly virtual or with immediate neighbors who knew only the present version of their lives. Dennis proved to be a remarkably stable partner. He took on significant domestic responsibilities, cooking regularly, keeping the apartment tidy, and taking care of practical needs. For Sabine, who had spent years caring for family responsibilities alone while Moritz was away on contract work, having a genuinely present partner represented a fundamental change. The couple's financial stability was solid. Sabine had conservatively invested the remaining insurance money, creating an emergency fund that provided additional security. Their combined salaries were sufficient for a comfortable standard of living. They avoided large purchases that might attract attention or require complex financial documentation. In 2021, Dennis surprised Sabine with a marriage proposal during a hike in the mountains near Garmisch-Partenkirchen. The proposal was romantic, but Sabine responded with careful hesitation. "I need to resolve some legal issues first," she explained. "Technically, I'm still married to Moritz, and even though he abandoned us, I can't pretend that doesn't exist." The answer wasn't entirely honest. Sabine had discreetly consulted a lawyer about procedures for declaring Moritz legally dead after 5 years of absence. The real reason for her hesitation was more calculating. Remarriage could lead to official paperwork and bureaucratic investigations she would rather avoid. Dennis accepted without pressing the issue. "There's no rush," he said, kissing her. "What matters is that we're together. The rest is just formalities." His understanding reinforced Sabine's belief that she had made the right choice. Throughout this period, Moritz's Volkswagen Amarok remained in bureaucratic limbo. The vehicle had been repainted from silver to a discreet grey months after his disappearance. The original license plates had been replaced with a set that Dennis had obtained through questionable means, plates registered to his late uncle Karl Schroeder's trailer, who had died in 2017. Dennis used the Amarok sporadically, mainly for long trips where Sabine's compact car would be unsuitable. He carefully avoided driving in Rosenheim or areas where he might be seen by acquaintances. When he needed to use the pickup, he parked it in Munich, an hour away, using it only in small rural towns or on highways where the risk of recognition was minimal. The strategy worked perfectly for 3 years. The Amarok became virtually invisible in the German traffic system, physically present but absent from records that could connect it to Moritz Wolf. Dennis had specialized in secondary routes that avoided speed cameras, checkpoints, and situations where license plates could be checked. Meanwhile, Moritz's official trail continued to disappear systematically. In January 2021, his bank account was closed due to prolonged inactivity. His social security number was marked as inactive. His voter registration was removed from Heidenau. Cancelled credit cards were finally removed from the systems. For all practical and legal purposes, Moritz Wolf had ceased to exist as an entity recognized by the German state. It was as if he had never been born, worked, or lived, 44 years before that October morning in 2018. The only person keeping Moritz's memory alive was Lisa. Although attempts to contact Sabine had become sporadic, Lisa had never completely given up the search for answers about what had happened to her brother. In 2022, Lisa made a decision that would fundamentally change the course of events. Frustrated by the lack of official progress and unconvinced by the voluntary departure narrative, she hired a private investigator specializing in missing persons. Hans Dietrich was a former Berlin police officer who had started a small business after retiring. Specializing in cold cases, Dietrich had useful connections in police databases and a deep understanding of German bureaucratic systems. Lisa hired Dietrich with a specific goal in mind: to locate Moritz's Amarok. "If my brother decided to start a new life," she explained at their first meeting, "he would have needed transportation. Either he's still using the truck or he sold it and we can track down the buyer." Dietrich accepted the case but warned of limitations. "Vehicles disappear more easily than we think," he explained. "They can be dismantled, sold on the black market, or abandoned where they will never be found. But it's worth a try." The investigation began with a systematic analysis of vehicle records throughout Germany. Dietrich checked sales databases, transfers, accident reports, and scrap records. Moritz's Amarok had not appeared in any system since October 2018. Dietrich expanded his search to neighboring countries: Austria, the Czech Republic, Poland, France, where illegally acquired German vehicles often ended up. Again, no sign of the silver pickup truck with license plate BANW 847. During his investigation, Dietrich also discreetly studied Sabine's activities after the disappearance. Although he had no legal authority to question her directly, he built a profile of the changes: move to Rosenheim, new job, relationship with Dennis, liquidation of Moritz's assets. "There's something too systematic about how she reorganized her life," Dietrich reported to Lisa in March 2023. "I'm not suggesting anything criminal, but the speed and efficiency with which she severed all ties with her husband is unusual. Most people keep at least a few sentimental belongings." Lisa agreed, acknowledging that suspicions were not evidence. "What's the next step?" she asked. Dietrich suggested a different approach. Instead of searching through official records, he proposed an active search using license plate recognition technology and informants in communities where illegally modified vehicles might show up. "If the truck still exists and is being used," he explained, "it will eventually turn up. Vehicles are hard to hide indefinitely. Someone has to drive them, fuel them, park them. When that happens, we'll be ready." The strategy proved prophetic. In April 2023, less than a month after Dietrich established a network of observers, he received a call from a mechanic in Nuremberg who had noticed a grey Amarok with suspicious license plates at a gas station. The mechanic, who collaborated with insurance companies on investigations of stolen vehicles, had discreetly photographed the truck. The photos clearly showed that the color had been changed, but the proportions and features matched the description of Moritz's truck perfectly. More importantly, a photo of the dashboard showed a faded sticker that Lisa recognized immediately, a small IG Metal Union emblem that Moritz had stuck on years earlier. "It's definitely his truck," Lisa confirmed when Dietrich showed her the photos. "Moritz stuck that sticker on when he joined the union in 2015. And look here," she pointed to a mark on the bumper. "This dent happened when he hit the gate 2 years before he disappeared." With photographic evidence confirming that Moritz's truck was still on the road, repainted and with fake plates, Dietrich immediately contacted the authorities. The discovery transformed what had been classified as a voluntary departure into a potential criminal investigation. The fact that someone was illegally driving a missing man's truck raised serious questions about the official version of events. If Moritz had left voluntarily, why was someone else using his vehicle with fake documents? And if he hadn't left voluntarily, what had really happened that October morning? Bavarian authorities officially reopened the Moritz Wolf case in May 2023, almost 5 years after his disappearance. The investigation shifted from a missing person search to a criminal investigation focused on determining how and why the truck had ended up in other hands. What they would discover in the following months would reveal that the carefully constructed story of a voluntary departure had been an elaborate facade to hide a much more sinister reality. The quiet life that Sabine and Dennis had built was about to be completely destroyed by the resurrection of a ghost they thought they had buried forever. The Volkswagen Amarok, the only remaining physical evidence of Moritz Wolf, was about to become the key that would unlock the truth and expose secrets carefully guarded for almost 5 years. On the cold morning of August 28, 2023, the operation carefully planned by the Bavarian police over 3 months finally went into action. The target was a grey Volkswagen Amarok tracked through a network of surveillance cameras and informants since Hans Dietrich had provided the first photographs to the authorities. The operation was led by Chief Investigator Andreas Bohm, the same police officer who had expressed skepticism about the original classification of the case as a voluntary departure. Bohm had spent weeks studying the truck's movement patterns, identifying preferred routes and times of peak activity. The analysis revealed that it was used mainly on weekends, following secondary routes between small towns in northern Bavaria. The interception was planned for the A6 Autobahn near Heilsbronn, in an isolated section where the vehicle could be stopped safely. 3 unmarked cars were strategically positioned, 2 for direct approach and a third blocking possible escape attempts. At 2:23 p.m., surveillance cameras confirmed that the grey Amarok was approaching the designated point. The vehicle was traveling alone in the right lane, observing the speed limit, with no behavior suggesting that the driver was aware of the police surveillance. Bohm, who was personally present during the operation, gave the signal to approach at 2:25 p.m. The 2 cars simultaneously positioned themselves in front of and behind the pickup truck, forcing it to stop on the shoulder. The third vehicle blocked any escape route. The driver showed genuine surprise but no resistance when the police approached. He was an ordinary-looking man in his 40s, wearing casual clothes and a cap. When asked to provide identification, he hesitated visibly before handing over a driver's license in the name of Stefan Hoffmann, a name that immediately set off alarms in the police systems. "This is not your real ID," declared Sergeant Kai Ludwig after checking via radio. "Can you tell us your real name?" The man remained silent for several minutes, looking alternately at the police officers and the pickup truck. Finally, he muttered, "Dennis Schroeder. My name is Dennis Schroeder." Confirmation of his identity revealed Dennis's minor criminal record, but more importantly, it established a connection to Heidenau, the same town where Moritz Wolf had disappeared 5 years earlier. Bohm, aware of this connection through his previous study of the case, immediately requested a thorough inspection of the truck and Dennis's arrest on suspicion of receiving stolen property. Dennis was transported to the Ansbach police station for initial questioning. The truck was taken to a forensic center in Nuremberg, where a team of specialized technicians would begin a detailed analysis lasting several weeks. During the first 48 hours in custody, Dennis remained almost completely silent. He confirmed his identity and provided basic information about his current address in Rosenheim, but categorically refused to answer questions about how he had obtained the truck, how long he had owned it, or any details about his relationship with Moritz Wolf. "I want to talk to a lawyer," was virtually his only substantive statement during 2 days of preliminary questioning. His attitude was not hostile or aggressive, but he showed a clear determination not to cooperate. While Dennis remained in custody, forensic analysis of the Amarok began to reveal disturbing details. The repainting had been done amateurishly but effectively, enough to significantly alter its casual appearance, leaving microscopic traces of the original silver color. More troubling was the condition of the license plates, which showed clear signs of alteration matching a trailer registered to Karl Schroeder, who had died in 2017. The most significant discovery came when technicians removed the passenger seat for detailed analysis. Hidden in a makeshift compartment under the seat, the team found a carefully preserved brown leather wallet. The contents were catalogued item by item: a valid driver's license in the name of Moritz Wolf, expired credit cards, an IG Metal Union membership card, and a faded photograph of Moritz and Sabine taken at a family event. More revealing was a fuel receipt dated October 16, 2018, 2 days after Moritz had supposedly left for his hunting trip, and 1 day after his wife reported that he should have returned. The receipt was from a Shell gas station in Bamberg, approximately 150 kilometers from Heidenau, in the opposite direction of the hunting area where Moritz had allegedly planned to go. The discovery was a turning point in the investigation. For the first time in 5 years, there was documented physical evidence that Moritz, or at least his truck, had been at a specific location after his disappearance. Bamberg made no sense in the context of a hunting trip, raising serious questions about the version of events accepted by the authorities. Böhm immediately requested an expanded analysis of surveillance footage from the Shell gas station for October 2018. Although 5 years had passed, there was a chance that images could still be archived in backup systems. At the same time, the investigation expanded to include Sabine Wolf, now living as Sabine Richter in Rosenheim. Her relationship with Dennis had been identified through employment and address records, establishing a clear connection between the man driving Moritz's pickup truck and the wife of the missing man. On September 2, 2023, a team of investigators went to Sabine's apartment for initial questioning. The approach was planned to appear routine. Investigators introduced themselves as part of a routine update on her missing husband's case, without initially mentioning Dennis's arrest or the discovery of the truck. Sabine greeted investigators with remarkable composure. She was dressed professionally. Her apartment was immaculately organized, and she offered coffee while answering initial questions in a courteous and cooperative manner. "We haven't had any direct contact with Moritz yet," she explained when asked about recent developments. "I occasionally think I've seen someone who could be him in crowds, but I'm always wrong. I guess it's wishful thinking." Sabine's demeanor changed noticeably when investigators mentioned finding her truck. She became visibly tense. Her hands began to shake slightly, and she asked several times where exactly the truck had been located and in what condition. You found him with the truck?" she asked, and there was something in her tone that made investigators pay close attention to her reaction. When informed that Dennis Schroeder had been arrested while driving the vehicle, Sabine initially claimed not to recognize the name. Pressed further, she admitted to knowing Dennis as an acquaintance from Heidenau, although she significantly downplayed the nature of their current relationship. "We met when I lived in Heidenau," she explained. "He provided IT services for the city hall occasionally. I lost contact after moving to Rosenheim." The statement was obviously false, considering that Dennis had provided Sabine's apartment address as his current residence. When confronted with the inconsistency, Sabine became more defensive and requested a lawyer before continuing to answer questions. Investigators respected her request but made it clear that she would be summoned for formal questioning in the coming days. They also informed her that a search warrant was being prepared for her apartment as part of the expanded investigation into Moritz's disappearance. On September 5th, search warrants were executed simultaneously at Sabine's apartment in Rosenheim and at her and Moritz's former residence in Heidenau, now owned by her new family. The operation involved 2 coordinated teams of forensic investigators, dogs trained to detect human remains, and soil and structural analysis equipment. The search of the Rosenheim apartment revealed a surprising collection of documents organized in a locked file box in the master bedroom closet. The box contained correspondence related to Moritz's life insurance, including multiple drafts of a letter nearly identical to the message sent to the Heidenau home in November 2018. More disturbing was a partially addressed envelope with a Frankfurt postmark, the same city from which the original letter allegedly sent by Moritz had been mailed. Initial analysis of the handwriting and ink showed consistency with the drafts found, suggesting that the letter from Moritz had been fabricated by someone else. The most shocking discovery occurred on the property in Heidenau, specifically in the backshed where Moritz used to store hunting equipment. The current family had used the structure for storage but had never carried out any significant renovations. When specialized dogs were brought into the shed, they immediately focused on a specific section of the back wall. Analysis revealed that a portion of the wall had been rebuilt with materials slightly different from the rest of the structure. Behind the false panel, investigators discovered a carefully excavated and sealed cavity. The space was large enough to accommodate a human body, and the floor of the cavity showed discoloration consistent with biological decomposition. Preliminary chemical tests using luminol revealed blood spatter patterns on the interior walls of the cavity and the original concrete floor of the shed. Soil and biological material samples were collected for DNA analysis, although investigators cautioned that 5 years of decomposition could have significantly degraded any genetic evidence. A strand of hair was recovered from a crack in the wooden floor of the cavity. Initial microscopic analysis showed characteristics consistent with middle-aged male hair, and the sample was immediately sent for comparative DNA analysis with samples from Moritz obtained from personal belongings preserved by Lisa. The discovery of the hidden cavity completely transformed the nature of the investigation. What had begun as a stolen vehicle case had become a homicide investigation. Evidence strongly suggested that Moritz Wolf had not left voluntarily, but had been killed and his body hidden in the shed where he kept his equipment. Based on the accumulated evidence, arrest warrants were issued for Sabine Wolf on September 8, 2023. She was arrested at her workplace in Rosenheim, charged with murder, insurance fraud, document forgery, and obstruction of justice. When informed of the charges, Sabine remained silent, but her hands trembled visibly as handcuffs were applied. Her only statement was a whispered question. "Did you find him? Did you find the body?" In the weeks following the arrests of Sabine Wolf and Dennis Schroeder, the Bavarian Police Crime Lab became the epicenter of one of the most complex forensic investigations in recent years in the region. Dr. Maria Engel, chief forensic expert with 15 years of experience in homicide cases, personally supervised the analysis of evidence collected both from the shed in Heidenau and from the suspect's personal belongings. DNA analysis of the hair strand found in the secret cavity was completed on September 15, 2023. The results confirmed with 99.7% certainty that the genetic material matched Moritz Wolf, definitively establishing that he had been present at the location where evidence of violence was discovered. The relatively good preservation of the genetic material was attributed to the dry and controlled conditions inside the sealed cavity. In parallel, analysis of the blood samples collected used advanced mass spectrometry techniques to determine not only the human origin of the material, but also specific spatter patterns indicating the type of violence that occurred. Dr. Engel and his team identified two distinct types: medium velocity spatters consistent with blunt trauma, and accumulation suggesting that the body had remained at the scene for a significant period after death. The patterns observed are consistent with injuries caused by a blunt instrument, possibly multiple blows, Dr. Engel explained in a preliminary report. The amount and distribution of blood suggests that the victim remained at the scene of the assault for several hours before the body was removed. The investigation expanded to include a detailed analysis of both suspects' cell phones. Dennis had attempted to destroy his device prior to his arrest, but forensic technicians were able to recover significant data from the damaged memory card. The recovered text messages revealed regular communication between Dennis and Sabine beginning in September 2018, 1 month prior to Moritz's disappearance. The most disturbing messages dated from the week before the disappearance. On October 10, 2018, Sabine had sent a message to Dennis. "He's going hunting on Tuesday. He always leaves very early before 6 a.m. It will be our chance." Dennis replied, "Are you sure about the time? We can't mess this up." A particularly incriminating exchange took place in the early hours of October 15th, around the time Moritz would have left home. Sabine sent Dennis a single word: "Ready." Dennis replied 2 hours later, "On my way to you. Keep everything normal." Cell tower analysis confirmed that Dennis had traveled from his apartment to Sabine's house in the early hours of October 15th, arriving in the Heidenau area around 7 a.m., approximately 1 hour after Moritz allegedly left for his hunting trip. Financial records also revealed suspicious patterns. Dennis had withdrawn $2,500 in cash from his account on October 12th, 3 days before the disappearance. The money was never traced or explained. Sabine had conducted online searches for how to clean blood from concrete and chemicals for removing biological odors in the week following the disappearance. Forensic investigation of the shed revealed that someone had made significant efforts to clean up biological evidence. Chemical analysis detected residues of high-powered commercial cleaning products, including sodium hypochlorite and ammonia, applied in concentrations higher than those required for normal household cleaning. Dr. Engel discovered that the concrete floor of the shed had been treated with muriatic acid, a substance often used to remove stubborn stains. The pattern of application and concentration of the acid indicate a deliberate attempt to destroy biological evidence. he concluded in his report. A disturbing discovery was made when investigators removed sections of the wooden floor from the cavity. Under the boards, they found fragments of fabric that further analysis revealed to be consistent with hunting clothes that Moritz had taken on his alleged trip. Microscopic fibers matched the camouflage jacket described in detail by Lisa Wolf during the initial investigation. Analysis of the fake letters found in Sabine's apartment revealed technical details that significantly strengthened the case. Handwriting experts confirmed that the handwriting on the draft versions matched Sabine's, not Moritz's. More revealingly, ink analysis showed that all versions had been written with the same pen, a blue Pilot G2 found on Sabine's desk. The partially addressed envelope had been posted in Frankfurt, but forensic analysis revealed partial fingerprints belonging to Sabine on the postage sticker. Investigators traveled to Frankfurt and obtained security camera footage from post offices during November 2018. A woman matching Sabine's description was identified in images from November 8, posting mail at a post office in the city center. The investigation discovered that Dennis had made significant modifications to the Amarok in addition to repainting it. Technical analysis revealed a hidden compartment under the rear seat where several items were found. Work gloves stained with substances that tested positive for human blood, a hammer with a wooden handle showing signs of recent cleaning, and a plastic tarp with perforations consistent with use for wrapping a large object. The hammer underwent intensive forensic analysis. Although carefully cleaned, technicians were able to extract microscopic biological material from cracks in the head of the instrument. DNA tests confirmed that the material matched Moritz Wolf, establishing a direct link between the tool and the victim. During this period, both Sabine and Dennis remained in preventive detention, isolated to prevent coordination of their defenses. Separate interrogations revealed significant inconsistencies in their versions of events. Dennis initially maintained that he had obtained the truck through a private transaction with someone known only by their first name. Confronted with evidence from the messages and location records, he changed his story to claim that Sabine had asked him to take care of the truck after Moritz left, but that he did not know where she had actually obtained the vehicle. Sabine insisted that her only involvement had been to write a letter at Moritz's request before he left. According to her version, Moritz had asked her to write the message and post it weeks later if he decided not to return. She claimed not to know how Dennis had obtained the truck and suggested that Moritz might have given him the vehicle before leaving. No explanation withstood scrutiny of the accumulated evidence. The chronology of messages, location records, forensic evidence, and the discovery of the cavity painted a coherent picture of premeditation and execution of a plan to murder Moritz and simulate a voluntary departure. In October 2023, soil analysis of the property in Heidenau revealed a final and devastating discovery. Using ground-penetrating radar, investigators identified a significant anomaly in the backyard, approximately 15 meters from the main house. Careful excavation revealed partial human remains buried approximately 1.2 meters deep. The remains consisted mainly of bone fragments and teeth, but were sufficient for confirmation of identity through dental records. Dr. Klaus Weber, a forensic anthropologist at the University of Munich, confirmed that the remains belonged to Moritz Wolf. Analysis of the bone fragments revealed fractures consistent with extreme blunt trauma, particularly to the skull. The fractures observed are consistent with multiple blows from a heavy instrument, Dr. Weber explained in his report. The extent of the damage suggests that the victim was attacked with considerable force and probably lost consciousness quickly after the first impact. The discovery of Moritz's body removed any doubt about what had happened. He had not left voluntarily. He had been brutally murdered and buried in his own backyard while his wife and accomplice constructed an elaborate hoax to conceal the crime. With the body recovered and comprehensive forensic evidence compiled, Bavarian prosecutors began preparing what they considered a virtually airtight case. Charges against Sabine were expanded to include premeditated first-degree murder. Dennis was charged with manslaughter and conspiracy, although prosecutors indicated they might consider a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Sabine. The investigation also revealed clear financial motives for the crime. In addition to the $85,000 in life insurance, Sabine had benefited from the sale of the house, $165,000, and the liquidation of other joint properties. The total value of her financial gain from Moritz's death was estimated at more than $200,000, a significant amount for a middle-class family with substantial debts. Lisa Wolf, who had set in motion the chain of events leading to the discovery of the truth, was personally informed about the recovery of her brother's body. "For 5 years I knew something wasn't right," she told the local press. "Moritz would never have left his family voluntarily. Now finally he can rest in peace, and those responsible can be held accountable. The community of Heidenau was deeply shaken by the revelations. Many residents remembered Sabine as a quiet and respectable woman, and Moritz as a hard-working and reliable man. The idea that such a brutal crime had been committed in their small town by people they knew personally defied comprehension. The forensic investigation had built a meticulously documented case tracing every step of the crime, from the initial planning through the messages to the final disposal of the body. Physical, digital, financial, and witness evidence combined to form a clear and compelling picture of guilt. With all the evidence compiled and analyzed, the case was ready for trial. Prosecutors expressed confidence that they would obtain murder convictions for both defendants, although they acknowledged that the absence of direct witnesses to the crime could make the trial challenging. What remained uncertain was whether Dennis or Sabine would choose to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for reduced sentences, or whether they would maintain their claims of innocence until the end. The answer would determine not only individual sentences, but also what specific details about Moritz Wolf's final moments would be revealed publicly during the trial. The trial of Sabine Wolf and Dennis Schroeder for the murder of Moritz Wolf began on March 18, 2024, at the Munich Regional Court, presided over by Judge Dr. Claudia Herrmann, known for her rigor in homicide cases and meticulous attention to procedural details. Public interest had grown significantly following regional press coverage, transforming what had begun as a small-town disappearance into one of Bavaria's most closely watched criminal cases that year. Chief Prosecutor Dr. Angela Weber opened the case with a forceful statement. This was not a crime of passion or a moment of uncontrolled rage. It was cold, calculated, and premeditated murder, carried out of greed and a desire to start a new life at the expense of an innocent man's life. Dr. Weber presented the jury with a detailed timeline of the events leading up to and following Moritz's murder, using digital, forensic, and financial evidence to build what she described as an airtight case against both defendants. She particularly emphasized the systematic nature with which Sabine and Dennis had attempted to erase any trace of Moritz from their lives and from German society. The victim did not simply die. He was systematically eradicated, the prosecutor declared. His identity was stolen, his assets appropriated, and his memory deliberately distorted to serve the financial purposes of the defendants. Sabine's defense, led by experienced attorney Dr. Martin Fischer, adopted a complex strategy seeking to minimize his client's role while directing primary blame toward Dennis. Dr. Fischer argued that Sabine had been manipulated and coerced by Dennis, a man with a criminal history who took advantage of her emotional and financial vulnerability. My client was a desperate woman, trapped in a troubled marriage and facing overwhelming financial difficulties, he argued. Dennis Schroeder identified this vulnerability and exploited it for his own criminal purposes. Sabine may have made errors in judgment, but she is not a murderer. Dennis's defense, led by attorney Dr. Thomas Müller, took a more direct approach, completely denying his client's involvement in the murder and characterizing him as a convenient scapegoat for crimes committed entirely by Sabine. Dr. Müller claimed that Dennis had been misled about the circumstances under which he had obtained the truck and that his only fault was trusting a woman who was lying about her situation. During the first 2 weeks, the prosecution presented an impressive series of expert witnesses. Dr. Maria Engel, the chief forensic expert, spent 2 days explaining in detail the evidence collected from the shed, the truck, and Moritz's remains. Her presentation included graphic photographs of the blood evidence, diagrams of the secret cavity, and comparative analysis of DNA samples. The most dramatic moment came when Lisa Wolf took the witness stand. She described with controlled emotion her close relationship with her brother, her immediate distrust of the voluntary departure narrative, and her years of struggle to keep the investigation into his disappearance alive. Moritz was a man of his word, Lisa declared, addressing the jury directly. In his 44 years of life, he never broke a significant promise or abandoned a responsibility. The idea that he would simply leave without a word, leaving debts and obligations behind, was fundamentally incompatible with the man I knew. When asked about interactions with Sabine after his disappearance, Lisa revealed details that had troubled the family for years. There was something about the way Sabine talked about Moritz that always bothered me. She never seemed genuinely concerned about his well-being or curious about where he might be. It was as if she already knew he wasn't coming back. The most impactful witness was Hans Dietrich, a private investigator hired by Lisa. Dietrich presented the court with a detailed account of how he had tracked Moritz's truck, including surveillance photographs showing Dennis driving the vehicle on several occasions throughout 2022 and 2023. For 3 years, this man drove the vehicle of a murder victim on the roads of Germany. Dietrich said, pointing to Dennis. He had changed license plates, repainted the bodywork, and removed identifying evidence. These are not the actions of someone innocent who has been deceived. The prosecution's case was strengthened by financial evidence presented by economic investigator Petra Hoffmann, an expert with the German Federal Police. Hoffmann meticulously traced the flow of money after Moritz's death. $85,000 from insurance, $165,000 from the sale of the house, and other assets liquidated to establish Sabine's new life in Rosenheim. What we see is not the behavior of a grieving widow reorganizing her finances after a traumatic loss, Hoffmann explained. It is a systematic pattern of asset appropriation suggesting prior knowledge that the spouse would not return to claim the property. During the third week, the defense began presenting its case. Dr. Fischer called a series of character witnesses for Sabine, including co-workers from Rosenheim, who described her as a dedicated employee and fundamentally decent person. Neighbors testified about her respectful behavior and apparent genuine distress during the initial months after the disappearance. The defense presented evidence about the Wolf's deteriorating financial situation prior to the murder, arguing that Sabine was under extreme psychological pressure that made her susceptible to manipulation by Dennis. Forensic psychologist Dr. Stefan Braun testified that Sabine exhibited signs consistent with post-traumatic stress and emotional dependency syndrome. However, the defense faced significant challenges when Dr. Fischer attempted to have Sabine testify on her own behalf. During direct examination, Sabine maintained that she had been coerced by Dennis into participating in the charade about Moritz's voluntary departure, but insisted that she genuinely believed her husband was alive when she wrote the fake letter. Under aggressive cross-examination by prosecutor Dr. Weber, Sabine's version quickly unraveled. Confronted with specific messages sent on the morning of the murder, Sabine initially claimed not to remember, then suggested they had been sent by Dennis using her phone, and finally admitted to sending them, but only to check if Moritz had left as planned. "So you're telling me," Dr. Weber asked, "that by pure coincidence, at the exact moment your husband was being murdered in your shed, you were sending messages to the man we now know committed that murder, using the word 'done'?" Sabine was unable to provide a convincing explanation for the timing coincidence, and her credibility as a witness was severely damaged. Dennis chose not to testify in his own defense, maintaining his right to remain silent throughout the trial. His defense focused primarily on questioning the reliability of the digital evidence and suggesting that Sabine had fabricated evidence to incriminate him after the fact. During closing arguments, Dr. Weber presented a detailed reconstruction of the crime based on the evidence. According to the prosecution's theory, Sabine had lured Moritz to the shed on the morning of October 15, 2018, supposedly to help her with something related to hunting preparations. Dennis was hiding in the shed and attacked Moritz from behind with a hammer when he entered the structure. The forensic evidence is clear. Moritz Wolf was attacked with extreme force, likely losing consciousness after the first blow, Dr. Weber stated. He was then brutally beaten to death by two individuals who had carefully planned how to benefit from his death. The prosecutor argued that the couple had hidden the body in the cavity prepared in the shed for several hours while cleaning up evidence and coordinating the fake hunting trip. That night, they moved the body to a burial site in the backyard using Moritz's own pickup truck to transport digging tools. After deliberating for 2 days, the jury returned with unanimous verdicts. Sabine Wolf was found guilty of premeditated murder, insurance fraud, document forgery, and obstruction of justice. Dennis Schroeder was found guilty of premeditated murder and conspiracy to commit fraud. Sentencing was handed down on May 12, 2024. Judge Dr. Hermann sentenced Sabine to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years, citing the premeditated nature of the crime and the coldness with which she carried out the subsequent charade. Dennis received a sentence of 18 years, with eligibility for parole after 12 years. This was a crime characterized not only by physical brutality, but by prolonged psychological cruelty, the judge stated. The defendants not only took Moritz Wolf's life, they robbed him of his dignity, appropriated his property, and denied his family the right to mourn properly for 5 years. The judge also ordered both defendants to pay restitution to Moritz's family in the amount of $200,000, representing financial benefits obtained through the crime. Lisa Wolf, who had attended the entire trial, made a brief but emotional statement after the verdict. "Finally, Moritz can rest in peace. Justice cannot bring him back, but it can ensure that those who took him from us face the consequences of their actions." The case had significant repercussions beyond the individual sentences. The investigation revealed flaws in the missing persons classification system that allowed the case to be prematurely closed as a voluntary departure. New guidelines were implemented requiring more rigorous investigations before missing persons cases are classified as non-criminal. Allianz Deutschland initiated civil proceedings to recover $85,000 paid out fraudulently. The company implemented new verification protocols for missing persons cases involving large insurance payments. The community of Heidenau established a memorial fund in Moritz Wolf's name to support families of missing persons in the region. The fund provides assistance for private investigations when official authorities have exhausted their resources. The house where Moritz was murdered has been sold again by the owners who had inadvertently purchased the crime scene. The property was acquired by a development company that demolished all existing structures, including the infamous shed, and built an apartment complex on the site. Sabine Wolf is serving her sentence at the JVA Aichach Women's Prison in Bavaria. According to prison reports, she keeps a low profile, participates in educational programs, and demonstrates exemplary behavior. She will be eligible for parole consideration in 2044, when she will be 66 years old. Dennis Schroeder is imprisoned at JVA Landsberg. Reports indicate that he has adapted poorly to prison life and has been transferred several times due to conflicts with other inmates. He will be eligible for parole in 2036. None of the convicted persons filed an appeal within the legal deadline, effectively accepting the court's verdicts. For Moritz's family, justice came after 5 years of uncertainty and suffering, but it came with the bitter realization that no sentence could restore what they had lost. The Volkswagen Amarok that had served as the key to uncovering the truth remains in police evidence storage, a silent reminder of how seemingly insignificant objects can carry darker secrets. The story of Moritz Wolf, an ordinary electrician who went hunting one October morning and never returned, has become a cautionary tale about how greed and betrayal can destroy lives, families, and entire communities. But it has also become a testament to the importance of perseverance, modern forensic science, and the unshakable brotherly love that refused to accept convenient lies in place of the difficult truth.